Hello, and welcome to this workshop titled Not Just Another Wellness Workshop, Tools for Rebalancing an Overwhelmed Nervous System. I'm Holly Jones. By way of introduction, this is a little bit about me. I'm a social worker and a yoga teacher by training. My interest in yoga is the physiological impacts. I wanted to give recognition to some of my influential teachers. There are many, and I've listed just a few here. These are the learning objectives for this workshop series. This series is meant to be a progression. However, you can jump in and go back as you need to. So we're going to describe the neuroscience concepts and how to apply these concepts to yourself and others. We're going to learn tools to We're going to understand the underlying impacts of trauma on the brain and body. We'll experience the benefits of subtle yoga and meditation for the nervous system, and we'll explore the Wellness Project webpage. This is the outline for session 1. In this first session, it's going to be an overview of the science, and this is going to set the foundation for the rest of the series. These are the core values that I want to offer: safety, choice, and connection. The goal of the workshop is to offer an understanding of how our minds and bodies communicate both internally and externally, consciously and unconsciously, and how this shows up for us as individuals, as well as how we interact in groups and in our communities and in our organizations, and how we can work to affect change, if we choose to, in ways that are authentic and meaningful for us. This is my passion, and I hope that I convey that through this series. Each workshop will include experiential practices to integrate the content. Now, your participation is optional. I hope that you opt in and try them, but if you need to take a break, please do so. I will be asking you to notice internal sensations, reflect on situations, consider alternative perspectives. This is to allow the information to sink in. If something feels different, that's okay. Just allow yourself to stay curious, and maybe it will make more sense later. If something seems familiar, again, that's okay. Just stay curious and maintain that beginner's mindset. This is just a little disclaimer that this is not medical advice. It's meant for general health promotion and exploring ways to rebalance an overwhelmed nervous system. If you have any physical or mental health conditions that put you at risk, please consult your medical provider. So now some stats. And I promise not to make this too boring, but I think it's important to recognize the magnitude of what's happening in our healthcare system. According to the CDC, 90% of our 4.1 trillion per year healthcare costs can be attributed to people with chronic diseases and mental health conditions. The national average of adults experience a mental illness is almost 20%, and Ohio ranks 48th for prevalence, with over 23% of adults experiencing mental illness. Ohio ranks 49th for serious thoughts of suicide. A quote from Kathleen Sebelius, the former Secretary of Health and Human Services, says that we pay 2.5 times what anybody else pays in the world, and our care outcomes look like we're in a developing country. And a quote from David Hoffman, policy chair of the National Association of Chronic Disease Directors, says that many routinely miss or ignore their body's warnings about the onset of serious chronic disease, or are unable to receive preventative care due to social or economic barriers. The result is poor collective health quality in a country that spends much more on healthcare than anywhere else. And he says, we also know there are strategies and interventions that can make a difference. This information is taken from the CDC. This is showing the leading causes of death and disability and the leading drivers of our 4.1 trillion annual healthcare costs. Notice that 6 in 10 adults in the US have a chronic disease, and 4 in 10 adults in the US have 2 or more. So why are we talking about chronic diseases? Chronic stress is a major contributor of chronic diseases, and inflammation is a major cause of those noted chronic diseases that we just looked at. So direct care professionals require active caretaking, engagement, patience, and empathy, and these demands can lead to more stress. And over time, if we're not taking care of ourselves, both physically and mentally, this can lead to chronic stress. And stress is not just a state of mind, it's contained within the entire nervous system. The nervous system must cope with the challenges of the external world. So chronic stress impacts many bodily functions: cardiovascular, intestinal, immune system, fertility, and maybe more. And I wanted to offer a note about compassion versus empathy because they get used sometimes interchangeably. Compassion is the foundation for co-regulation. We need compassion to do these jobs. Empathy is feeling someone else's pain, whereas compassion is witnessing another's pain without sharing or feeling responsible for their pain. And that's something that we'll explore when we get into Stephen Porges's work on the polyvagal theory. Compassion offers a calm, what he would call ventral vagal state that allows us to relate to the pain of others without becoming overwhelmed. Compassion sees the suffering and joy of others, and then we honor the other person's capacity to have their own experience. And it also asserts that we must attend to our own pain and suffering first. So we'll explore more about self-compassion later in this workshop series. Take-home point number 1, inflammation is the root cause of many, maybe most, chronic health conditions, and this includes depression, rage, and anxiety. And chronic stress can lead to inflammation. So a different path is needed. The different path that I'm suggesting is built from the framework of the biopsychosocial spiritual model of health. And this model that I'm using is with permission from Christine Weber. I like this model because it gives us a visual of how our health is influenced by many factors that we might overlook. George Engel is a prominent scholar who engaged the psychosomatic movement in the 70s. He introduced the biopsychosocial model. Our health is interconnected with our culture. As our culture continues to have this need for speed, and we're getting bombarded with information notifications, we're forced to adjust to a faster pace with shorter attention spans. Therefore, we need ways to balance the fast pace, always on, always doing mindset with some quiet, slow, reflective time and opportunities. Otherwise, we'll become overwhelmed by stress, anxiety, fatigue. We might have insomnia. So think about just in the short few minutes that we've been in this webinar, how many times have you looked at your phone, or how many times have you heard your phone buzz, or maybe an email notification went off? Those are the things that are building up inside of us without us even having an opportunity to take a break. And so what I'm offering in this workshop series is the awareness of what's happening, and then some choices about how we might have an opportunity to have choices. Salutogenesis is a different approach to health. So our Western healthcare system uses what's called pathogenesis, which is a focus on disease, the creation of disease. So if we stop the disease, then we have health. Salutogenesis, the focus is on the creation of health and global well-being. So Aaron Antonovsky came up with this from his book, The Salutogenic Approach to Wellness. So the sense of coherence can be explained as the ability to manage our stressors by deploying our internal and external resources. Comprehensibility is the cognitive component. So this is where we would say to ourselves, my stressors are clear, structured, maybe even predictable. And I'm going to use an example here of rush hour traffic or just being stuck in traffic. Manageability is the behavioral component, and that's where we would say to ourselves, I have the resources available to meet these demands posed by the stressor. So for traffic, it would be I have reliable transportation, or I have an alternative route, or maybe I have an alternative schedule. Meaningfulness is the motivational component. This is where we say to ourselves, my stressors are challenges worth my time and energy. So in the traffic situation, we would say, I'm going to plan ahead. I'm going to check the traffic report. This is yoga as a system of health. So we're going to explore this in this series. And again, I'm using this with permission from Christine Weber, the salutogenic process of yoga. So it starts with exteroception at the top, and that's looking outside of ourselves. And that's about our survival. Am I safe? This deals with neuroception, which is how neural circuits determine whether situations or people are safe. Again, this is a term from Stephen Porges that we'll get to later. Then it goes to proprioception, and that determines if my body feels safe in the environment. And then interoceptive awareness is listening to the signals from inside my body on how I'm feeling. And yoga helps us develop all three senses. In the boxes, comprehensibility means feeling safe, grounded, present, having structure or predictability. This is important for good mental health. Manageability relates to weathering the storm, having self-understanding, having a sense of agency. This helps us develop our morals and values. And the final phase, meaningfulness, is self-actualization. This shows up as love, acceptance, loving kindness towards others. So this is a feedback loop. When your life has meaning, you can manage your stressors. And you can know that you're safe at your core. And that's the creation of health and that sense of knowing who you truly are. Now a note about exercise and inner size. A lot of people think that exercise is the key to being healthy. And a lot of people think that yoga is a form of exercise. In our Western culture, in my opinion, yoga has been sort of taken apart or watered down. Both of these, exercise and inner size, are necessary for our health. Exercise is focused on that external, and inner size is focused on the internal. Yoga-based movements that are slow, controlled, require balance and coordination and tracking of our body's position in space, helps with our proprioception, our interoception, and it provides a context for training our attention. And now we're going to look at the nervous system. So the nervous system has two branches, the autonomic and the somatic. The autonomic is the involuntary, and it has two sub-branches, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. The sympathetic mobilizes us for action, responds very fast, and it's necessary for the stress response to kick in. If a bus is coming down the street, we don't want to think about it. We want that immediate response. The parasympathetic provides homeostasis. It's much slower to activate. And this means that it's also slow to respond. So all these things are happening below our level of consciousness. We don't need to think about it. Our culture and our lifestyles are demanding more time in the sympathetic nervous system sort of side. We're faced with many demands on our time and attention. We're bombarded with information in sound bites, tweets, push notifications. This leads to a dysregulated nervous system, and sometimes we can get sort of stuck in that sympathetic system, and it creates trouble then when we're trying to self-regulate, when we're trying to focus, when we're trying to go to sleep, when we're trying to digest. The vagus nerve is the 10th cranial nerve. It's actually a bundle of nerves. In vagus in Latin means to wander, so it's wandering throughout our thoracic cavity. It innervates and gives signals to many of our organs and bodily functions. And 80 to even 90% of these fibers are sensory, meaning they. And vagal tone is very important. So when you have high vagal tone, you have positive self-regulation, you're able to handle stressful situations, respond appropriately, and then move on or go to sleep at night. If you have low vagal tone, then you have trouble with self-regulation. A stressful situation could set you up to have a bad day. Maybe you're ruminating on it, you can't fall asleep at night. So we have ways to test our vagal tone. And one of these is a breath test. So you'll take a full cycle of breath, and then you'll block one nostril as you exhale. So I'll show you, and then you can do this on your own. So you'll just inhale naturally through your nose, and then you'll block off one of your nostrils with a finger and exhale. Then release when you're ready to inhale. And then you'll block the other nostril and exhale. And then ask yourself, did I notice a difference between my two nostrils? If you notice that the right nostril was a little more open or a little more dominant, then that would mean you're in the sympathetic side right now. So maybe you're paying attention. If you notice that the left nostril was a little more open or dominant, that's more related to the parasympathetics changing throughout the day. So it doesn't mean one is better or right. It's just something to notice along with our vagal tone. The other test is with the uvula, which is at the back of the throat. So you could do this either in the mirror or you could take a little selfie if you open your mouth, like when you go to a doctor when you're sick and they say open up and say ah, ah, that thing in the back should be straight vertical. If it's crooked, that could indicate low vagal tone. And then the other way to notice this is simply practicing awareness. That interoception is another sense that we'll discuss later in this series. So just taking a moment to notice how you're feeling. If your heart's beating really fast, but you're not doing anything physically active, or if you're feeling really sleepy, really withdrawn. So those are ways to ask yourself how you're doing. How's your vagal tone right now? This shows what homeostasis looks like. The vagus nerve needs slow movement to build vagal tone. The parasympathetic system responds to slow and rhythmic movements. Because the vagus nerve fibers are sensory, by practicing slow rhythmic movements and breath awareness, this massages the vagus nerve, creating that vagal tone, and it signals to the brain that everything's okay. And these messages of safety help the brain feel calm and stay out of hyperarousal, anxious states, or hypoarousal, which are depressed states. So good vagal tone means lots of resilience. Take home point number 2, good vagal tone means healthy resilience. So now I want to introduce this little clip of Dr. Huberman on the Tim Ferriss show talking about breath. Dr. Huberman is an American neuroscientist and associate professor in the Department of Neurobiology and Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at Stanford University School of Medicine, who's made contributions to brain development, brain plasticity, and neural regeneration. He's describing the physiological impact of a sigh breath, and this is something that he and his researchers have studied in their lab. And so it's an inhale, and then an inhale sip, and then a long exhale. This is something we do when we're tired, when we yawn, and it's like a but you might do it with your nose. You might. Dogs do this, children do this. So I'm going to play a little clip of this video and then we will do a little practice. So breath can be a wonderful resource. So we're going to practice diaphragmatic breathing in a calming manner. So in general, and he just said this, by extending the exhale, we activate that stress reduction. So we're activating the parasympathetic system. But sometimes just noticing the breath can also bring the mind into that more parasympathetic state. So this breath is going to massage the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve passes through the opening of the diaphragm. So when we exaggerate breathing this way, it provides that massage to the nervous system. Before we get started, I just want to say that the yoga tradition and Western science agree that emotional states can influence the breath, and the breath can influence emotional states. So we're going to use both science and yogic tools to experience. Here's our diaphragmatic breath. If you think about the diaphragm as a dome shape, when we inhale, the rib cage in the belly will expand. And then when we exhale, the rib cage in the belly contract. Now, you're not forcing this. This is just what's going to naturally happen, but we're bringing our attention there. When we inhale, the diaphragm is sort of flattening, and when we exhale, the diaphragm domes. So we're going to try exhaling just a little bit longer than we inhale. Now, you can try this with your hands around your rib cage. You can rest your hands at your desk, whatever feels appropriate for you. You can close your eyes. I'll talk you through it. I'm going to close my eyes, do whatever feels comfortable for you. When you're ready, take an inhale. Notice that expansion. And then when you exhale, notice a slight contraction. When you inhale, that diaphragm is slightly flattening, and when you exhale, the diaphragm is slightly doming. So try 3 more. Just noticing your breath. Noticing that even in stillness, there's movement. And when you're ready, if your eyes were closed, softly blink them open. You might just take a moment here to make a mental note of how you feel in this moment. So now let's try some movement. So if you're sitting in a chair, you might want to slide. If you're sitting in a chair next to your desk, you might want to slide your chair a little bit away from your desk. I'm going to press play. And like I said, these practices are totally optional. I hope that you try it and maybe even let me know how it works for you.
Feet are flat and parallel. Spine is lifted. Interlace the fingers and place behind the head. Inhale and broaden the elbows. Exhale and round forward. Inhale, open, and exhale, round and soften inward. 2 more times like this. On your next inhale, lean laterally to one side. Notice sensations across the lifted armpit, rib cage, and abdomen. Press into your feet and come back up center. Exhale and lean to the other side. Notice sensations in your back body. Press into your feet and come back up center. Inhale here, squeeze your elbows together, and exhale and twist to one side. Come back to center and twist to the other side. Twist to each side again. Notice how your breath supports the twisting. Now interlace your fingers, flip your wrists outward, and extend the arms any amount. Inhale and lift the arms overhead any amount. Exhale and push the arms out to your sides and release. Now roll your shoulders. Switch the interlacing of your fingers, extend through the arms. Without locking the elbows, press down through the feet as you lift upward. Reach up. Exhale and extend the arms out and down. Now notice any lingering sensations.
More on the breath. So this breath called Brahmana is nourishing energy. So when you're feeling sluggish and you need a little bit of energy, we're going to focus on our inhale. So I like to think of this as making the bed breath. You know, when you make the bed and you lift up that sheet and there's that lingering of the sheet coming down to the bed. So we're going to inhale and then let the exhale linger and fall. Inhale, and you can even add your arms in here if you want to in any way. They can come out to the side or overhead. Inhale, exhale. Let the exhale linger. Inhale, get big. Exhale, let it linger. One more like this. And pause for a moment, just noticing how that made you feel. So when you need a little pick-me-up, this is something you can always come back to. So breath in healing and health. I'm offering some information about different types of pranayama. Pranayama is life force energy, and this is part of the Yoga Sutras. And the Yoga Sutras say that pranayama is the vehicle to manage the mind. So the purpose is to shift our physiology. So some practices, Langana is calming. And so that's where we would extend the exhale. Energizing, Brahmana, we just did that one. We're gradually building up the inhale. So maybe when you first did your inhale, it was like, not that we were counting, but let's say it was like a 3-count inhale. Maybe by the third time you did it, it would have been like a 5-count inhale. Building up that inhale is energizing. Cooling breath, the one here I'm offering is called Shatali. That's like sipping an inhale. So when you're hot, you would, through your pursed lips, you would sip like you're sipping a drink. And if you try that, you'll notice that it sort of brings that coolness to the tongue. It even kind of dries out your tongue. So when you're hot, you can do that for cooling. And then cleansing, Kapalabhati, is considered the skull shining breath. And that's a focus on contracting exhales. Now, we're not going to practice all of these techniques right now in this workshop, but I wanted you to have this as a resource. And there are instructional videos on the Wellness Project webpage, which I will show you. And my suggestion always for establishing a breath practice is to start by noticing your breath without changing it, without manipulating or aggravating it, because breath practices are becoming quite the in hot topic. You've probably heard of square breathing or 4-7-8 breathing. I say it's important to establish breath awareness. Square breathing didn't work for me. 4-7-8 doesn't work for me. I like to practice in a way that honors my nervous system. So these practices that are being talked about are not universal. So don't feel bad or like, oh, I'm a bad breather if that didn't work for you. Start by noticing your breath just as it enters your nostrils. Usually when it enters your nostrils, you'll notice that it's cool. And then notice it as it exits your nostrils. Usually you'll notice that it's warmer. You can notice which nostril is more open. You can observe the breath in these ways, offering kindness and respect to your physiology. You breathe, we all breathe automatically all day, all the time, when we're sleeping, all the time, right? So if we can just observe 3 cycles of breath 3 times a day. So if you think about this, like before I eat my meals, I'll observe 3 cycles of breath. That's an easy way to start a mindfulness practice and a breath awareness practice and to reset your nervous system. And you might also notice a difference in your digestion. There are some more points about breath, and I touched on this. Different pranayama techniques, which technique to use and when will help you balance your nervous system and improve your health. And there's no one breath fits all. So get to know your breath and take your time. If you practice breath awareness for the rest of your life, that is a wonderful practice. You don't have to get bored and move on to something else. There's plenty of information just in breath awareness. And some breathing techniques may cause hyperarousal of the sympathetic nervous system. So if you start to feel dizziness, nausea, or even that your heart rate is increasing, you don't want that, then stop. Don't do that. Talk to a trained yoga therapist. If you have health concerns, talk to a medical provider. So this is Stephen Porges, the founder of polyvagal theory, and he's credited with this theory in the 90s. He's a distinguished university scientist at Indiana University, where he's the founding director of the Traumatic Stress Research Consortium. He's the professor of psychiatry at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and professor emeritus at both the University of Illinois at Chicago and the University of Maryland. He served as the president of the Society for Psychophysiological Research and the Federation of Associations in Behavioral and Brain Sciences, and he is a former recipient of the National Institutes of Mental Health Research Scientist Development Award. He's also the founder of the Safe and Sound Protocol. I'm offering his theory in 2 bullet points. I don't know if that's ever been done before, but I would describe it as the science of safety and connection. And he has said that breath and movement are the main route to stimulate the vagus nerve, support our organs, and support homeostasis. So more about this polyvagal theory. Actions and decisions start in the body. The social engagement system is what links breath, facial muscles, and vocalization to the vagal cardioinhibitory pathways that calm the body. So this ventral vagal complex is the signaling system for motion, emotion, communication. This is our social engagement system. The sympathetic nervous system is mobilization. So this is our fight flight, gets us moving, allows us to respond and react very quickly. The dorsal vagal complex is the immobilization. This is the system for conserving, withdrawal. It's our passive defense system. He says that breathing is linked with the ventral vagal complex. Therefore, slow exhalations, especially those involving movement of the diaphragm, have a powerful calming effect by recruiting the vagal pathways. So Porges compared the yogic system, which is the 8 limbs, into 4 principles based on polyvagal theory. The nervous system must cope with and adapt to the challenges of the external world. Before optimizing our mental physiological functionings, we need to be our own body. Use of breath and postures provide tools for systematic changes that support the brain and organ functioning. And sensory challenges and mental effort provide the top-down neural exercises that regulate the organs and creates the path for exploring consciousness. So he's saying that the polyvagal theory can help therapists accept yoga as a neurophysiological based path to healing. And he's focused on pranayama as a yoga of the social engagement or that ventral vagal system. So relating to that salutogenesis model of health that we looked at, number 1 on his theory would be related to the comprehensibility of the salutogenesis model. Number 2 and 3 would be related to that manageability. And number 4 would be related to the meaningfulness. So remember, number 1, comprehensibility, was understanding that I have challenges. So that's the nervous system must cope with and adapt to the challenges. His theory, number 2 and 3, are speaking to manageability. So it's saying like, okay, so I have these challenges and I need to be aware of it, but I have the tools. So the tools here would be breath and breath with postures, providing those systematic changes that support the brain and organ functioning. And then his part number 4 relates to meaningfulness. So that's providing me those mental messages that, yes, I have challenges and I have tools, and it's worth my time to use those tools to meet my challenges. So classical yoga purpose is to still the fluctuations of the mind so that we can rest in our true nature. And through this stability and balance, we find greater self-understanding. And now today, neuroscience is teaching us the mechanisms behind the yoga practices and why they work. So the two are coming together. The practice of stilling the mind is to discover and recognize who you truly are. And that's the whole point. It's not just stilling the mind to be quiet, but we need to start with stillness to have that or find that homeostasis, which then leads to the self-discovery. And this shift is about using the mind to change the brain, and that's neuroplasticity. All aspects of the yoga tradition facilitate building a foundation of awareness. This is what benefits the nervous system. Awareness builds resilience. You can respond versus react. So yoga as a system, yoga is an integrated system of ethics, meaning how we relate to others and within ourselves, asanas, which are the physical forms, pranayama, which is the energy and breath, and meditation. And then this system or lifestyle for achieving greater physical, mental, and spiritual balance. So as yoga has evolved from its roots, it's been sort of picked apart. And we see this in how a lot of times yoga is depicted as something for hyperflexible or young or mostly white, affluent people in America. And this is unfortunate because the traditional system is an integrated model for balancing and nourishing our bio, psycho, social, spiritual selves. So in this workshop, we're going to focus on asanas and pranayama. Future workshops, we will then look to meditation and some of the other parts of this system. This is more evidence on how yoga supports a healthy nervous system. So gentle stretching reduces inflammation, enhances brain hemispheric integration, and we'll get to that, balances the nervous system, increases vagal tone. Walking has been shown to improve cognition, so a lot of therapists will do walk and talk. And then core work reduces anxiety. So let's try another practice here.
Clasp your wrist behind your back. On an inhale, lengthen your spine. Then exhale, tilt your head toward your wrist. Option here to lift and lower your gaze from your ceiling corner to the floor. Notice any sensations of ease. Release the clasp and use the bottom hand to assist lifting your head back to center. Take a moment to notice any differences in sensation between the two sides of your neck. And switching sides, clasp the opposite wrist behind your back. Another option is to clasp the back of the chair. As you're ready, tilt your head toward the clasped wrist. And again, try exploring slow movement by drawing a diagonal line with your eyes from the ceiling corner to the floor. Noticing any sensations along the way. Release the wrist and use the bottom hand to lift your head back to center. What do you notice? You may want to roll your shoulders. Now place your fingertips to your shoulders and begin making circles. Make it your own. It doesn't have to look a certain way. Now try circling in opposite directions. One goes forward and the other goes backward. If it feels tricky, that's good. Remember, this is good for our brain. And switch directions. Now release and shake it out. And brush it off. Shaking and brushing are good for our skin and the fascia. Now rub your palms together using friction to create heat. Place your hands on or in front of your eyes. Notice 2 or 3 cycles of breath. Slowly release your hands and notice any lingering sensations.
Now we're going to talk a little bit about the window of tolerance. This is Dr. Dan Siegel's model. When we are inside these lines, if you think of these lines as a window, when we're inside the window, we can self-regulate. That's called our optimal arousal. We feel safe, grounded, and resourced. This relates to the manageability part of that salutogenic model. Slow practice trains your nervous system to build this resilience. Physical and psychological resilience are intimately intertwined because the body and mind are one system. For people who've had a high degree of stress or trauma, their window of tolerance can actually shift. So even situations that linger, even like COVID, this can cause a change to our window of tolerance. These situations that linger require time to bring the nervous system back to homeostasis. And if there isn't time for rebalancing it, then our system can get unbalanced. So all aspects of the yoga tradition facilitate building a foundation of awareness and resilience. So this allows us to respond versus react. Slow movement recruits different parts of the nervous system and the brain. And yoga helps us widen the window. For example, when you can pause the breath and be comfortable. So when we were doing that, making the bed breath, we would inhale and then exhale, let the exhale fall. And maybe before we inhaled, there was that slight little pause. I didn't ask you to notice that because I don't want you holding your breath. But once you start to get comfortable, we were building up an inhale and then we were letting the exhale come into the body. There might have been a little pause there before you needed another inhale. Those practices are building our window of tolerance. Our window of tolerance, as it widens, offers more resilience. Take home point number 3. Slow movement recruits different parts of your nervous system and your brain. This is the hand model of the brain, and if you're not, I highly recommend watching Mary Viccario's video about this. It's linked here, so you can watch it another time. We're not going to go over it too much right now, but you can see right here the picture of the hand model of the brain. And what we're doing right now is combining. We're doing practices that speak to the lower parts of the brain, so the spinal cord, the brainstem, the amygdala, limbic system. All of these breath practices are speaking to these lower parts of the brain. And then the higher functioning part, the prefrontal cortex, we're allowing this part to know that it's safe. So we're sending messages of safety. We're allowing ourselves to feel what it's like in our body when this part doesn't have to respond to everything that's going on outside of us. Of the brain. So the brain grows from the bottom up. The bottom part is the spinal cord and the brainstem, and these are regulating the heart rate, our breathing, our temperature. And these neurons form first in order to keep us alive, but they're less plastic. And as the brain develops, it unfolds like a flower and has the capacity to change throughout life, which is a new finding. It used to be that we thought we couldn't change, but now we're finding that, yes, throughout life, the brain is changing. So we want brain integration so that all parts of the brain are working together to maintain balance. And this way we don't flip our lid. Mindfulness helps integrate the brain. So it's giving better access to the prefrontal cortex, which is where we make our decisions. So if you're not familiar with this hind brain, so that would be the back of our brain, this is related to survival. Am I safe? Homeostasis is that midbrain part. So it's looking for cues of safety. And so that would be where we're looking at other people's eyes, their tone of voice, if their body position seems safe. This is all happening below the level of consciousness. And then the frontal brain is the restoration. That's where we're making decisions and learning things. This is a wonderful website that you can tour all parts of the brain. So I just wanted to offer this and give thanks to the Society for Brain Science for sharing this with us. So if you're really enjoying knowing all about the little scientific details of the brain, this 3D tour is fun to go check out. So the first area to develop is located at the spinal cord, and it's referred to as the hindbrain. It includes all those autonomic functions for survival: breathing, heart rate, sleep and wakefulness, involuntary movements, and digestion. The brainstem has 3 parts: the medulla, which is related to our heart rate, our breathing, our blood flow, and reflexes like coughing or swallowing, sneezing, even vomiting. The pons is related to blinking, chewing, focusing vision, balance, hearing, and facial expressions. And the cerebellum has 2 hemispheres. The inner portion communicates with the cortex to coordinate voluntary muscle movements, maintain specific posture, and help stay balanced. It's hard to get to from our conscious mind, but breath is a gateway. So to try this right now, I would invite you, if you are able to stand, come to a standing position. And if you're able to balance on one foot, balance on one foot. And when you're balancing on one foot, notice those little micro movements that are happening in your standing leg, just to keep you balanced. That's your proprioception, working to keep you balanced. Okay, and then place your other foot back down. Maybe shift around till you find balance. And now notice what's happening between the two sides. That's interoception. So yoga benefits for the brainstem. Yoga helps with our inhibiting behavior, GABA. When the brain is low on GABA, GABA is our chief inhibitory neurotransmitter. It gets stuck in this hyperdrive, and that can lead to anxiety. So it's saying here that 1 hour of yoga can increase GABA by 27%. Yoga helps to optimize the function of coordination, reduce stress, promote addiction recovery, decreases the stress response, that HPA axis. And so we want to use balancing poses. We want to focus on smooth, even breath. We want to focus we want to use focus for meditation. So some examples could be candle gazing or using a mandala. We want to use props because props give the brainstem more sensory input, and this can be as simple as the floor. So if you have a chance to lay down on the floor, noticing and allowing the floor to really support your body weight. In the chair, noticing and allowing your body weight to be supported in the chair, and using your awareness to connect with your sensations. Now we're going to try the Ujjayi breath, and this is sometimes referred to as the sound of the ocean. And generally, this is a slow rhythmic breathing, and slow rhythmic breathing acts our sympathetic nervous system, that vagus nerve, which reduces our stress. And it also increases the release of prolactin and oxytocin. And this breath involves airway resistance or contraction of the laryngeal muscles. These are believed to stimulate sensory vagal afferents to the brain and promote improved autonomic regulation. So the glottis muscle controls voice modulation through expansion or contraction. And contracting this glottis creates a light whisper sound like the ocean. And it supports concentration. The concentration aspect in yoga is referred to as dharana. So this breath allows more oxygen to be transferred into the lungs, which then enhances the blood flow throughout the body. But with the body in a calm state, so either with slow movements, like maybe your arms may be moving, or no movement, your hands just in your lap or at your side, it's not under that physical stress or tension. So I'm going to walk you through this. Again, you are welcome to close your eyes or cast your eyes downward. I'm going to do 3 rounds, and it kind of looks like you're fogging up a mirror. So first, 2, you could place your hand up in front of you, and I'm just going to do this as a visual. So it's almost like you're trying to fog up a mirror, like if you had a mirror in your hand. So you would inhale through your nose and exhale through your mouth. Inhale through your nose. Exhale through your mouth. Now do 3 rounds, but close the mouth. After 3 rounds, if your eyes were closed, softly blink them open. This practice is shown to lower our blood pressure by creating a light pressure on the carotid sinuses. The carotid sinuses are responsible for regulating blood pressure through the arteries. Lower blood pressure supports health and longevity, as well as being naturally calming for the mind. Now the midbrain. This is located on top of the pons. It's involved with primal emotions, movement, coordination, hearing, and coordinating movement with thinking. So the example would be voluntary movements that we don't think about. So if you start scratching an itch or if you maybe pick up a pencil or a fidget or something, or if someone maybe throws a snowball at you and you have to duck. These things are things that we don't think about because the midbrain is working. And it's a small path that connects survival and reason. So yoga benefits for the midbrain, again, connecting the brainstem with the front brain, and it helps to optimize the function of the limbic brain via self-regulation. It increases gray matter in the left hippocampus and left hemisphere in general, and this correlates with positive affect, self-regulation, and pro-social behavior. Strive for an attitude of curiosity. So sometimes we move in ways that we're used to. Ask yourself, what would it feel like to move in a different way? So think of dancing and why dancing brings so much joy is because we're moving in different ways. Start by moving slowly and with awareness. Listen to the breath. And an example would be that soft ujjayi breath. And pause between sides of the body. So in our practice videos that I lead, I offer that time to pause because pausing is as important as doing the poses. And Carl Jung says that yoga brings the unconscious into conscious, and he calls this the key to recovery. Now let's take a little brain break. So at this point, if you have a window, maybe you could look out the window. If you want to just maybe shake your hands, roll your shoulders around, take some sighing breaths, take anything out, move around. If you're standing, maybe you shake one leg and then the other. Maybe you could bounce. Bouncing's really good to reset everything, really good for the organs. And so I'm showing a horse here because another beneficial breath is the sort of horse breath. So I'm going to take a sip here. And we're going to exhale with the sound that horses make. So I encourage you to try this too. Inhale, and when you're ready, just. So when life feels overwhelming, rather than telling someone to calm down or take a deep breath, just do a, because it's fun and it is shown to bring some relaxation. All right, that was fun. Let's do another practice. This one you may want to come to standing for, your choice.
Stand and separate your feet at least hips distance apart. Take your right thumb to your left earlobe and your left thumb to your right earlobe. Now begin squatting and lifting the elbows as you squat. Inhale into the squat and exhale as you rise up. Clinical trials have shown that this Kriya helps with mental focus, memory, and mood. It's like jumper cables for the brain hemispheres. Gently squeezing the earlobes stimulates the pituitary and pineal glands. Continue for several rounds. When finished, notice if you have nostril balance.
So that's a fun one to do if you're getting ready to study for something. This is the forebrain or the front brain. It accounts for 2/3 of the brain's mass. It's the most evolved part of the human brain. This is our executive function. This is where we think and reflect and we're aware. This works or is related to our attention, reasoning, controlling our behaviors, our working memory, setting goals. The cerebrum is lateralized, meaning it has different functions on each side. So the corpus callosum is made up of white matter that stretches across the gap between the hemispheres, and that helps with the communication. Within the forebrain, the thalamus receives input from our senses. all sensory signals go first to a relay station in the thalamus. The thalamus relays sensory impulses to the cortex. The cortex controls our thoughts, decisions, memories, and emotional responses. About 85% of all neurons in the body are in the cortex. 85% of all neurons in the body are in the cortex. The prefrontal cortex oversees thought and logical thinking, and it's been linked to depression and schizophrenia. Some yoga benefits for the front brain. We want to focus on internal awareness and sensations in the body. So this is interoception. Awareness regulates our nervous system and it turns on the parasympathetic nervous system. So cross-crawl movements benefit the corpus callosum because of that hemispheric integration. And this can include everyday movements like walking, biking, dancing, if you dance every day, practicing sensory, memory, reasoning, and executive functioning. Processing sensory, memory, reasoning, and executive functioning. Focus on breath guiding the movement, especially if you're using that ujjayi breathing. It's really nice to allow the breath leading the movement. And noticing sensations. So when we do one thing on one side of our body, take a moment, pause, notice how that felt in that one side, and then do it in the other side. Notice where your attention is drawn. And then try map differentiation. That means noticing the small places that you don't usually pay attention to. So when you expand your arms out laterally, yes, we do focus on expanding across the chest, but can you also notice when you expand through your hands, the little spaces in between each of your fingers? Can you notice that as well? When you press down into one foot and you lift the other foot, can you notice the difference between pressing down through the ball of the big toe versus the pinky toe? And then maybe the second toe versus the fourth toe. Those things are also really nice for the front brain. So let's try another practice. And after you practice this once with instruction, you can return to these again and again. You can replace my voice with some soft music or no sound at all. The movements that we're doing facilitate resilience so we can adapt to changes in our schedule. And it also helps with digestion. So you can come back to these practices. That's the hope or the intent, is that you return to these different times of day and notice how it affects you when you practice them at different times of day.
Get rooted in your sits bones. Feet are parallel. Slide your hands to your thighs. Inhale and lift the gaze. Exhale, slide the hands forward and round your back. Inhale, slide the hands back and lift. Exhale and round, lowering your gaze to your navel. Inhale and open across the chest. Exhale and round. Now come back to center. Inhale, extend the spine. Exhale and lengthen forward any amount. Press into your feet to lift up. Now again with a 3-count breath. 1, 2, 3. And inhale, 3, 2, 1. Now a 4-count breath. 1, 2, 3, 4. And inhale, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now a 5-count with a pause. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Pause. Notice the length from your seat to your head. Press into your feet and your hands. Inhale up. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Using your hands, externally rotate the thighs. Come to the front edge. Place the fingers of the inside of the thighs and thumbs on the outside. Exhale and rotate one shoulder forward. Press back to center. Switch sides. Rotate again to each side. Using your hands, bring your thighs back to center. Pick up one thigh and make circles with the ankle. Then make circles with the shin. Then go the other way, circling. Then try swinging the leg back and forth. Place it down. Now notice any difference in sensations between the two legs. Second side, start with circling the ankle. Then add the shin to the circles. Go in both directions. Notice that your abdominals are also engaged here. Place the leg down. Exhale and lift one leg as you draw your navel in. Inhale and set it down. Switch. Exhale as you lift. Inhale to release. Feel the contraction and the expansion. Connect with the rhythm of this movement. Now pause and notice any sensations at your navel center. This is great for digestion. Now begin cross-crawl movement, lifting opposite hand and foot. This can be small or large. You choose. Bring your head and eyes into it by turning from side to side as you walk. Feel yourself chair walking. Now pause and notice. Now extend the arms around and upward through your center and connect at your heart. The modification here is to use cactus arms. Repeat this again, respecting your shoulders. Connecting movement with breath. Now pause and notice. Now place your hands on or near your heart. Connect with your heartbeat. Bring to mind kindness. On your next inhale, expand laterally and then cross the opposite hand in front. Inhale and extend. Exhale and connect. Continue like this. Bring kindness and compassion to yourself, and then offer the qualities up and bring them back to you. An option here is to follow your palm with your gaze. Are you still alternating hands each time? Our arms and hands are an extension of our heart. Remember, this is how we make mental connections through top down and bottom up. Pause with your hands at your heart. How are you feeling in this moment? Bring your hands together at your heart. Bow your head to your heart. Namaste.
So we'll get to explaining a little more about this in a minute, but I wanted to offer why we do certain movements. So in that practice, we did some head and neck movements. That's because the vagus nerve passes through here. We did some rhythmic movements because that's soothing to the parasympathetic nervous system. We did repetition. I offer awareness, so focusing on interoception. I offered a little bit of novelty, layering different sets of movements and things together. And I try to offer some curiosity, which speaks to that passion part of us. In the previous video, it was called a Kriya, Tapam Karanam, where we had our hands to our ears. That's about brain hemispheric integration and nostril balance. So we're going to get to these, the reason, the science of why these things are so beneficial. So yoga makes 3 important changes in the brain. It reduces inflammation, and it reduces inflammation by increasing GABA. And when this is low, this is a key contributing factor to depression and anxiety. This happens by increasing the levels of brain-derived neurotropic factor, BDNF, which is a protein that acts like a fertilizer for the brain. It stimulates formation of new brain cells. And new brain cells means the likelihood of forming new positive habits. It develops the mohawk of self-awareness. This is the midline structures like the insula, the anterior cingulate cortex, the posterior cingulate cortex, the medial prefrontal cortex, and the orbital prefrontal cortex. A lot easier to say mohawk of awareness. These structures together form our sense of our identity, our sense of ourself. NIH research suggests that a regular yoga practice strengthens these areas, and a sense of self is critical to our resilience. And it improves the left forebrain, the left hemisphere of the cerebrum. Research shows that more gray matter in the left forebrain corresponds with 3 measures of resilience: self-regulation, pro-social behavior, and positive affect or mood. Yoga also improves the areas of brain relating to our attention, focus, and memory. So this is Dan Siegel. So I was just speaking about these 4 key elements. So he talks about neuroplasticity and how does the brain change? He says it changes in these 4 key elements. So focused awareness, this means being fully present so that we're open to receiving information from the body. Repetition enhances those neural pathways formation, and it also provides a sense of safety and familiarity. Novelty keeps things interesting. Novelty keeps you coming back for more. And passion, which includes that sense of curiosity, is what keeps us engaged. So Dan Siegel, I love his quote, "Where attention goes, neural firing flows, neural connections grow." Neuroplasticity describes the brain's ability to adopt new functions, recognize itself, and make new neural connections as a function of experience. Research has shown that almost every major structure of the neuron is capable of change based on experience. However, not all regions of the brain are equally plastic. Brain plasticity gradually decreases with age, which explains why it's easier for children to learn to speak a new language than it is for adults. The neuroplastic effects of yoga. Increased GABA protects against depression and anxiety. So increasing the parasympathetic nervous activation increases that GABA, so creates more calming. It increases gray matter in the left forebrain, which increases oxytocin. And it may decrease the gray matter in the amygdala, which lowers the cortisol. Amygdala is that fear center, so if we have less fear, we have less reactivity. And the effects of slow yoga. So like I said, I like to emphasize even not just going slow, but having a pause between. Mindful slow practices create awareness, which is critical for that neuroplasticity. Awareness distinguishes yoga from fast exercise, again, exercise versus exercise. And slowness of movement is the key to awareness, and awareness is the key to learning. So slower movement leads to map differentiation so that more change is possible. Take-home point number 4, repetition creates brain changes. This is about trait versus state. So practices need to be repeated. Rhythmic elements drive the nervous system, including using postures, singing, chanting, and meditation. So we can change our state by practicing breath practices, by getting up and walking outside, mindfulness, things like that in small doses. Yes, that will change our state, but we want to change traits. So that means we have to do these things over and over. So the rhythmic repetition of these practices leads to that neuroplastic change, which changes our nervous system as a trait, not just a temporary state. So this is about top-down and bottom integration. Top-down is when we're sending positive affirmations to the body. mind, and heart. When we're paying attention and we're noticing and we're linking breath with movement. So bringing in joy and compassion to ourselves and then bringing those qualities out into the world. So when we do these practices, that's a top-down message. I want compassion. I'm going to bring compassion in. Bottom up is using movement and breath to send signals of safety, self-regulation, or positive vibes back to the brain to let the brain know everything's good, I'm feeling okay. So with increased self-awareness, messages from the body integrate with emotional and cognitive information. Yoga postures can affect the extinction learning, the reframing of emotions, and positive affect. So now I want to describe a little bit about the Wellness Project. This is a web page that you can go look at on the DODD website. There's a little intro video here. This will be provided in your resources. I'm not going to play this video right now, but it's worth watching. So when you first go to visit this website, I would encourage you to start with this introduction video because it's a navigation about how to get around and what's on the rest of the web page. Recognizing that the physical and mental health toll that our direct support professionals and other workers were facing, not just during COVID, but ongoing, a group of state employees from each of these servicing state agencies came together to offer resources and supports to the workforce caring for individuals. We wanted to go further and bring these resources to the community and to the general public. We know that there are more caretakers that are unpaid, as many as there are in formal settings. Therefore, DODD created this dedicated webpage that's available to anyone. So again, please go check this out. It is free of jargon. It is easy to navigate. There are tabs labeled read, listen, watch, taste, explore, experience, reflect, and connect. And the little video explains what each of those tabs has included and shows you a little bit about what's there. So this concludes this first workshop. Here's my contact information. Please feel free to reach out to me with any questions or comments that you might have. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope this was helpful for you.